Every great journey begins with a moment of silence, a pause where the heart whispers before the mind can sig intender. Perhaps you have already felt that subtle call, the sense that something greater is preparing to unfold, yet the path ahead remains veiled by uncertainty. It is in these thresholds of life where clarity seems distant that the greatest opportunities for transformation emerge. Many people, at some point, discover themselves living on autopilot, caught between routines and doubts, unable to hear the quiet instructions the universe continually sends. This silence is not absence, it is invitation. It is the door that waits to be opened. To begin this video, I want you to remember that every turning point carries with it a moment of preparation. Before the breakthrough, before the expansion, there is always a period of inner alignment. These times may appear as delays, obstacles, or even confusion, but they are in truth the fertile ground where clarity takes root. Instead of forcing answers, the journey is about learning to listen, to allow your own essence to re-emerge, and to recognize that guidance is never absent. It only waits for your readiness to perceive. This introduction is more than words. It is the opening of a field where we will walk together. Here we will explore how to receive clear orientations before decisive changes in life, and how to walk in full synchronicity with daily existence. The promise of this journey is not magic, nor empty hope. It is the awakening of practices and inner states that reveal answers with simplicity and depth, even when everything outside seems uncertain. In this path, we will address your hidden questions, the weight of unresolved pain, and the recurring sense of disconnection from purpose. And gradually we will create a bridge between your inner silence and the voice of the universe, a bridge that will allow you to move with confidence and harmony. This is where our journey begins, a space of listening, of openness, and of commitment to the transformation that awaits you. Every turning point in life begins with a subtle silence, a pause that is often uncomfortable, because it strips away the noise we use to avoid ourselves. This silence is not emptiness, it is an invisible invitation to listen more deeply. Many people fear this silence because it seems to remind them of everything unresolved, every doubt, every fragment of life that has not yet found its place. Yet, it is within this apparent void that the first spark of orientation arises. Before the universe can reveal its signs, the body and mind must enter into a state of coherence, where thought, breath, and feeling are no longer at war with each other, but move like instruments in harmony. This coherence is not achieved through force or perfectionism. It emerges through the willingness to observe the inner landscape with honesty. When the breath is shallow, the heart restless, and the thoughts fragmented, the capacity to notice subtle guidance weakens. The inner static becomes louder than any external message. In contrast, when breathing becomes steady, emotions are acknowledged without judgment, and the mind rests in openness. A new kind of clarity appears. It is not an answer shouted from the heavens, but a quiet alignment that allows signals to stand out against the background of daily chaos. At the heart of this transformation lies a fundamental principle. Attention determines perception. When the nervous system is dominated by fear or urgency, attention narrows and searches only for threats. Life is filtered through lenses of scarcity, doubt, and defensiveness. However, when the nervous system is regulated, attention expands, and possibilities that once seemed invisible step into view. What appeared to be obstacles reveal themselves as transitions. What looked like coincidence becomes synchronicity, and what once felt like silence now speaks with clarity. The path toward this inner coherence often begins with the body. The rhythm of the breath is a gateway into a calmer state. By slowing the exhale, the body signals safety to the nervous system. Muscles soften, the heart rate steadies, and the mind slowly loosens its grip on repetitive cycles of worry. Naming the emotions present further reduces their grip. To call something by its name is to bring it out of the shadows and place it into the light of awareness. Fear, uncertainty, hope. Each word carries the weight of recognition, and recognition is the first step toward liberation. From this place, a single clear question can emerge. Instead of drowning in a flood of doubts, the seeker narrows the inquiry to one essential focus. The quality of the question shapes the clarity of the answer. Vague demands such as, "What is my destiny?" rarely yield meaningful guidance, but focused inquiries like, What is the next step that honors my energy and purpose? Create a container for response. The universe whispers through repetition, through subtle patterns that echo across different areas of life. By holding one question at a time, the ability to notice these repetitions sharpens. The stillness that follows the question is as important as the question itself. This is not the stillness of waiting impatiently for a result, but the stillness of listening. It is the same silence that exists between the notes of music, the pause that allows the melody to breathe. In this receptive state, orientation does not appear as a complete roadmap, but as a glimmer of the next step. Perhaps a conversation that arises unexpectedly, a word overheard at the right moment, or a feeling of lightness when considering a particular action. These are not accidents. They are responses tuned to the frequency of a coherent state. Metaphor can help us understand this process. Imagine trying to tune an old radio. When the dial is slightly off, the station dissolves into static, and no matter how loudly you increase the volume, clarity never arrives. The solution is not volume but precision. A gentle adjustment of the dial brings the signal into focus, and suddenly the message is clear. Life functions in the same way. Without coherence, the volume of effort, anxiety, and searching only produces more noise. With coherence, the signal reveals itself effortlessly. It is important to recognize that guidance is not always affirmation. Sometimes the signs point to caution, to rest, to delay. At other times, they direct us toward an unexpected path. The practice is not about forcing the universe to confirm our desires, but about listening for alignment. This alignment is tested over time through repetition and resonance. A true orientation will not appear only once. It will echo in different forms until the message is undeniable. The daily application of these principles creates a shift that is both subtle and profound. By dedicating even a few minutes each day to breathing with awareness, naming emotions, asking one focused question, and allowing silence, the inner field is recalibrated. Patterns emerge more clearly. Confusion dissolves and confidence grows. This confidence is not arrogance but trust in the dialogue between self and universe. It is the trust that you are not abandoned in silence, but accompanied by a field of intelligence that responds when you are ready to perceive. As this practice deepens, life begins to feel less like a struggle against uncertainty and more like a dance with rhythm. Even challenges become signals to slow down, reflect, or adjust direction. The anxiety of needing to know everything in advance softens into the wisdom of knowing the next right step. Over time, these steps form a path, and the path reveals a life that feels aligned, purposeful, and guided. This chapter is the threshold, the point of awakening where silence ceases to be frightening and becomes fertile. By embracing coherence, through breath, awareness, clarity of questioning, and receptive silence, you begin to cultivate the conditions for true orientation. It is not about controlling the flow of the universe, but about learning how to attune to it. The signals are always there. The invitation is to listen, to align, and to step into the conversation with presence and trust. There comes a moment when silence transforms into communication, when what once seemed like random occurrences begins to resemble a dialogue. The universe does not speak in sentences or commands. It speaks in patterns, in repetitions that invite attention. A word overheard more than once in different contexts, a symbol that appears unexpectedly across days, or the sudden alignment of opportunities that could not have been orchestrated by coincidence. These are not accidents. They are part of a language that requires both patience and sensitivity to interpret. This language of signs is often misunderstood. Many fall into the trap of chasing every coincidence as though it carries a hidden prophecy, and in doing so, they exhaust themselves with noise. True synchronicity does not demand frantic searching. It emerges from a state of receptivity. Just as a musician does not force the next note but listens for it, the seeker of alignment must learn to recognize which signals hold weight and which are only static. Not every occurrence carries meaning, and learning this distinction is the art that brings peace instead of confusion. At the root of this discernment is coherence between inner values and external signs. If a message appears that contradicts the essence of your purpose, it is unlikely to be authentic guidance. Signs that align with your deeper values, however, tend to echo in multiple ways until they can no longer be ignored. The key is not to demand immediate clarity, but to observe over time. Synchronicities build like a melody, repeating in different forms until their meaning becomes undeniable. Journaling becomes a sacred tool in this process. By recording patterns, impressions, and the context in which they appear, you create a living map of the dialogue between yourself and the universe. With time, you begin to notice which signals consistently lead to fruitful outcomes and which fade into irrelevance. This practice is not about seeking control, but about cultivating trust that guidance will show itself in rhythms and cycles. It shifts the weight of decision-making from anxious guessing to attentive listening, supported by evidence gathered through lived experience. The repetition of signs carries a peculiar comfort. When a thought, symbol, or phrase emerges again and again, often in moments where it was not consciously sought, the body senses resonance. This resonance is not always logical, but it is felt. It is the recognition that something beyond your personal effort is participating in your journey. In these moments, faith is not blind, it is born of evidence. The repeated pattern becomes a thread woven into the tapestry of your life, guiding you to take steps you may not have considered otherwise. It is equally important to understand the purpose of delay. Sometimes the absence of signs is itself a form of communication. Silence can indicate a need to rest, to wait, to allow circumstances to mature. The Western mind often resists this, preferring constant affirmation. But in spiritual terms, pauses carry as much wisdom as movement. A period where no signs emerge can be the universe's way of protecting you from premature decisions. Learning to accept this silence with patience is a profound form of trust. Synchronicity does not always arrive as affirmation. It may come as redirection, a door that repeatedly closes, a relationship that consistently falls into dissonance, or opportunities that vanish before they can be embraced. These too are messages. They are not punishments, but forms of alignment, guiding you away from paths that would drain your energy or lead you into imbalance. To perceive them as part of the same dialogue is to embrace a fuller picture of guidance, where no is as sacred as yes. There is also beauty in the ordinary signs that people often overlook. The stranger who shares a story that mirrors your struggle, the song that plays at the exact moment of contemplation, the gentle sense of déjà vu when stepping into a new space. These are subtle invitations. They remind you that you are part of a living web where nothing stands isolated. Each signal becomes an echo of connection, a reminder that the boundaries between your inner world and the external are far more fluid than you once believed. Interpreting these signs does not require mystical talent, but presence. Presence sharpens perception. The more you inhabit the current moment with full awareness, the easier it becomes to notice patterns that would otherwise be invisible. Distraction and haste blur this perception, making everything appear as noise. Slowing down, breathing, and engaging with life deliberately transforms your vision, allowing the signs to reveal themselves in their natural rhythm. As you deepen in this dialogue, the language of the universe ceases to feel foreign. It becomes as familiar as a trusted friend's tone of voice. You begin to recognize when guidance is subtle encouragement, when it is gentle redirection, and when it is simply silence urging you to trust the unfolding. This intimacy with signs builds resilience, because you no longer depend solely on the intellect to make decisions. Instead, you walk in partnership with a greater intelligence, confident that the path will illuminate itself, one step at a time. This chapter marks the transition from silence into dialogue, from inner coherence into external resonance. It affirms that guidance is always present, not in grand spectacles, but in repetitions, rhythms, and resonances that weave themselves quietly through the fabric of your days. By honoring these signs with attention and patience, you step into a relationship of trust with the universe. And in that trust, clarity ceases to be a fleeting gift and becomes a living presence, guiding you toward the life that is already calling your name. There is a sacred power in the questions we carry, a force that shapes not only the answers we receive, but the very state of consciousness through which life speaks back to us. Many wander through existence overwhelmed by questions that are vague, heavy, or scattered, and in doing so they blur the possibility of hearing anything at all. The universe does not respond to chaos, it responds to coherence. To ask clearly is already to open a doorway for guidance to enter. The quality of a question begins with honesty. When one asks from a place of fear or demand, the body closes, and the answers that appear are colored by the urgency of survival. Yet, when the question emerges from a grounded heart, free of expectation, a different atmosphere arises. It is as though the inner field is cleared and the signals that arrive stand out with sharper definition. This is why it is often said that wisdom is not about having the right answers, but about asking the right questions. The formulation of the question itself becomes an act of alignment. It is striking how the body participates in this process. The body reacts before the mind comprehends. A certain path may bring a subtle sense of openness, a lightness in the chest, or a deep breath that arrives without effort. Another path may feel like contraction, tension in the stomach, or an unexplainable heaviness. These sensations are not mere coincidences. They are signals, delicate but consistent, pointing toward resonance or dissonance with the question posed. In this way, the body becomes the first interpreter of the universe's response, a compass that guides us through the landscapes of possibility. But to hear these responses, silence is essential. Silence is not a passive emptiness. It is the active space where echoes can return. After asking, one must resist the temptation to chase the answer, to fill the gap with noise, or to force a resolution. The answer often appears not in the moment of questioning, but in the hours or days that follow, woven into conversations, opportunities, or inner realizations that arrive unannounced. Silence gives the question room to breathe, and in that breathing space, the answer finds its way through. There is also a humility required in this dialogue. To ask is to admit that not everything is within your control. It is to acknowledge that you are a participant in a larger rhythm, one that may not always deliver the answers you expect, but will always deliver the answers you need. This humility protects the seeker from disappointment and keeps the heart open to redirection. The universe often responds in fragments, giving not the final destination, but the next step. To accept this is to enter into partnership with mystery rather than opposition to it. The practice of asking and waiting becomes a rhythm of trust. One clear question, followed by a pause, becomes the heartbeat of alignment. Over time, this rhythm deepens into a form of conversation, a subtle exchange where you begin to recognize how answers are carried not only by signs and synchronicities, but also by feelings, instincts, and sudden clarity. It is as though the mind quiets enough to let the deeper intelligence of life speak through channels that were always present, but often ignored. There is also a lesson in restraint. Asking too many questions at once scatters the energy of attention. The universe does not deny you answers. It simply cannot deliver clarity when you dilute your focus. Just as a lens must be adjusted to capture a clear image, your questions must be refined to capture clear responses. One question at a time, held with patience, yields more guidance than 100 demands shouted into the void. Metaphor offers a way to understand this delicate balance. Imagine standing at the edge of a still lake. When you throw a single stone, ripples form, and in the stillness you can trace their patterns across the water. But if you throw many stones at once, the ripples collide and the surface becomes chaotic. Nothing can be observed with clarity. The act of asking a single question is like dropping one stone into the lake of your consciousness. The silence that follows is the stillness that allows you to watch the ripples unfold, to see the response reflected back to you. The discipline of asking and waiting also creates resilience. Life does not always give immediate responses, and learning to hold a question with patience strengthens the capacity to endure uncertainty. This endurance is not passive resignation, but active trust. It says, even in the absence of immediate clarity, I know that the rhythm of life will bring me what I need in due time. This attitude transforms waiting from frustration into a practice of presence, from impatience into reverence. Ultimately, the art of asking is the art of aligning. It teaches you to speak with precision, to listen with openness, and to walk with humility. It dissolves the illusion that guidance must come in dramatic revelations and replaces it with the truth that answers are most often subtle, arriving like whispers carried on the wind. By learning this art, you no longer force the universe to bend to your urgency. You bend to the rhythm of the universe, and in doing so you discover that you were never without guidance. This chapter stands as a reminder that questions shape destinies. When you learn to ask with clarity and to welcome the silence that follows, life itself becomes a teacher. The answers do not come all at once, but step by step, in a cadence that allows you to grow into the person capable of receiving them. And perhaps the greatest answer is not the one that arrives from outside, but the one that emerges from within, carried to the surface by the silence you were finally willing to honor. There is a difference between moments of inspiration and a life shaped by ongoing guidance. Many have experienced flashes of clarity, those rare days when everything seems to flow with ease, when decisions unfold naturally and signs appear at every turn. But the challenge lies not in touching these states momentarily. It lies in sustaining them, in weaving synchronicity into the fabric of everyday life. To live guided is not to rely on rare sparks of insight, but to cultivate a rhythm that allows clarity to emerge again and again. This rhythm does not depend on extraordinary rituals or dramatic gestures. It is born from consistency, from small and intentional practices that anchor awareness throughout the day. Just as a musician does not tune an instrument once and expect it to stay in harmony forever, the seeker of alignment must retune their inner field regularly. Breath, attention, silence, and reflection become the gentle adjustments that keep the inner instrument ready to resonate with the frequency of guidance. The power of routine is often underestimated. Many associate routine with monotony, but in spiritual terms, routine is the soil in which transformation grows. The repetition of simple actions, carried out with presence, shapes the nervous system, calms the mind, and creates an atmosphere where synchronicity can be noticed. Without rhythm, the signs may still appear, but the scattered mind fails to perceive them. With rhythm, the signals stand out clearly, like stars emerging in a night sky. One of the most profound shifts that occurs when routine is honored is the dissolution of anxiety. Anxiety thrives in unpredictability, in the absence of anchors. When you create steady moments to breathe, to ask, to listen, and to reflect, the nervous system begins to trust the flow of life. This trust softens the compulsion to control and allows space for the dialogue with the universe to unfold naturally. Instead of demanding answers, you begin to expect them with quiet confidence, knowing that they will arrive in their own time. Synchronicity thrives when life is approached with awareness of cycles. Just as nature moves in seasons, so too does the inner world. There are days of expansion, where inspiration and opportunities overflow, and there are days of contraction where silence and waiting take center stage. To honor both is to step into harmony with the larger rhythm of existence. By creating daily practices that hold space for both movement and stillness, you no longer resist these cycles, but move within them gracefully. A practical way to embody this awareness is to mark the flow of the day with small rituals. Morning becomes the time to plant intention, to breathe and set the tone for the hours ahead. Midday offers a chance to pause, to recalibrate, to notice what signs have already appeared. Evening becomes a time of reflection, to gather the threads of the day, to recognize patterns, and to release what no longer serves. These are not mechanical tasks, but sacred pauses that create coherence. Each repetition builds a deeper relationship with the field of guidance. There is wisdom in simplicity. It is tempting to believe that more complex rituals bring greater power, yet the opposite is often true. The universe responds not to the complexity of your practice, but to the coherence of your presence. A few moments of genuine silence, a question asked with honesty, or a page of reflections written at night may open more doors than hours of restless effort. Consistency amplifies clarity, and sincerity outweighs intensity. Over time, the benefits of these practices begin to compound. Patterns that were once invisible reveal themselves with striking clarity. Guidance that once seemed uncertain becomes reliable. The body itself begins to anticipate these moments of alignment, entering them with greater ease. Trust deepens, not because life eliminates all uncertainty, but because the dialogue with the universe becomes familiar. In this familiarity lies resilience. No matter what unfolds, you know that guidance is available, that signs will appear, and that clarity will return. The greatest gift of rhythm is that it transforms synchronicity from an occasional experience into a way of life. When you live attuned to daily alignment, the extraordinary becomes ordinary. Every conversation, every delay, every coincidence is seen through new eyes, as part of a greater pattern that supports your path. Even obstacles lose their sharpness, for they too carry messages. Life ceases to feel like a sequence of random events and becomes a dance of meaning. This chapter closes the circle of preparation. From silence to signs, from questions to routine, the path has revealed itself as one of coherence and constancy. The invitation is not to chase fleeting moments of clarity, but to cultivate the soil where clarity grows. When you create rhythm, you create a vessel for guidance to pour into. And as the vessel fills day by day, you begin to live not as someone searching for answers, but as someone walking within them, in steady dialogue with the universe. Every chapter of this journey has carried us deeper into the quiet truth that guidance is never absent. It is only waiting for our awareness to open. We began with silence, discovering that what appears empty is, in reality, the seedbed of coherence. From there, we learned to listen to the language of signs, to honor patterns not as coincidences, but as part of a dialogue that bridges the visible and the invisible. We entered the art of asking, shaping our questions with clarity and humility, and discovered that silence itself is part of the answer. Finally, we embraced the rhythm of daily alignment, realizing that synchronicity flourishes not as an occasional gift, but as a way of living when nurtured through consistency. At the heart of it all lies a simple revelation. Clarity is less about chasing answers and more about creating the conditions for answers to arise naturally. When body, mind, and spirit are aligned, the universe can whisper through repetition, resonance, and rhythm. What once felt confusing becomes guidance. What once felt lonely becomes communion. What once felt meaningless becomes a tapestry of meaning, woven moment by moment. The greatest promise of this path is not that it will remove all uncertainty, but that it will give you the strength to walk within uncertainty with trust. You are not left adrift. You are accompanied, guided, and invited into an intimate conversation with life itself. Every breath, every pause, every repeated sign is evidence of that companionship. The invitation is ongoing, to honor silence, to hold your questions with openness, and to recognize that the rhythm of alignment is not something you visit, but something you embody. This is how synchronicity ceases to be a rare event and becomes the natural pulse of your existence. Now that we have walked together through silence, signs, questions, and rhythm, I want to ask you something that only you can answer. Are you ready to live your life as a continuous dialogue with the universe instead of waiting for isolated miracles? This single decision, the choice to listen, align, and walk with presence, has the power to shift everything. If what you have heard resonates with your spirit, I invite you to stay connected. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss the teachings and practices that can keep deepening your journey. Share your reflections in the comments, because your voice may become the sign someone else needs to hear today. And do not stop here. Continue watching the next video on the screen, where we will expand these insights and move even closer to a life of harmony and abundance.